Good day, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin this morning with a move designed to protect Venezuela's sovereignty in the face of renewed aggressions from the United States. The Venezuelan National Assembly approved a special law on Sunday to enable President Nicolas Maduro to pass executive orders. The enabling law, as it's called, will allow Maduro to enact legislation for the next 9 months geared towards defending Venezuela from U.S. attempts to destabilize and isolate the nation. The measure follows Washington's categorization of Venezuela as a security threat. Thousands of Venezuelans took to the streets of Caracas on Sunday to show their support for the socialist government of Nicolas Maduro and express their firm rejection of the U.S. government's interference. During the rally, President Maduro pledged to send a letter to Washington signed by 10 million Venezuelans.
We are going to take the letter. We are going to set the government of the United States to all of the public squares of the country, so that it's seen house by house and for it to be signed by 10 million Venezuelans in order to send the letter as a protest to the White House.
And international solidarity for Venezuela continues to grow around Latin America and the world. Rallies, demonstrations, and workshops have been held in a number of countries, including El Salvador, Peru, and Bolivia. They're all in rejection of the strong arm tactics of the Obama administration and its attempts to fracture unity in the region. Bolivian President Evo Morales called upon Latin Americans to stand up to the bullying of the United States in the hemisphere.
The fight is ongoing and does not stop, my brothers and sisters, where there are foreign agents who want to dominate us and steal from us economically. We must never forget this, my brothers and sisters. Recently, we have been listening to the threat that the government of the United States toward Venezuela. They are saying that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. How can a small country be a threat to the United States? How can we possibly be a threat to the United States?
Solidarity with Venezuela has also been expressed by Cubans who participated in a concert at the University of Havana on Sunday. Thousands of Cuban youth attended the event, which was attended by high-ranking Venezuelan diplomats as well, including the ambassador to Cuba, Ali Rodriguez Araque. While the Cuban people expressed their solidarity with Venezuela, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Roberto Jacobson has arrived on the island to continue talks of normalizing relations between the United States and Cuba. Official sources say the latest round of negotiations in Havana could last several days and will focus on easing travel restrictions and Cuba's demand that it be removed from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. For more now on Cuba-U.S. relations, we go to our correspondent Jorge Gestoso in Washington.
Roberta Jacobson, the Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere in this surprise third round of negotiations in Havana, is aiming to increase the staff of the diplomatic mission there and also to get the travel restrictions lifted from the U.S. diplomats in that mission. Also, they're aiming to try to reestablish the diplomatic relations before the Summit of the Americas is going to take place on the 10th and 11th of April in Panama. Most probably, the negotiations are going to last up to Wednesday, and the Cubans, by their own side, they're trying to get from the U.S., that the State Department is already evaluating, the lifting of Cuba from the list of countries that are sponsoring terrorism and also to reestablish banking services. It's going to be interesting, and we're going to get more information throughout the following days. Now we get back to you.
Acclaimed Mexican journalist Carmen Aristegui has been fired from the international radio network MBS Radio. It follows a controversy involving the dismissal of 2 colleagues from Aristegui's team. The controversy began last week with the unveiling of a new website called Mexico Leaks, created to share information and denounce official corruption. Two of Aristegui's collaborators were relieved of their positions after exposing a real estate scandal involving President Enrique Peña Nieto's wife. Aristegui was subsequently fired after demanding the reinstatement of her colleagues. For more now on these events in Mexico and protests planned over Aristegui's dismissal, we go to our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
It is expected that protests will be held today outside of the Mexico City station of the private Mexican radio company MVS after it fired late on Sunday evening the prominent and critical journalist Carmen Aristegui. Now, the announcement comes after a week of tensions with the very popular radio announcer and the company after two members of her investigative team were suddenly fired for Aristegui's program's endorsement of an online platform called Mexico Leaks that encourages citizens to anonymously leak information on government and corporate corruption to the media. Now, according to reports, Aristegui demanded that the station reinstate the two investigative journalists from her team who were responsible this past year in uncovering political corruption in the president's cabinet, as well as identifying a secretive prostitution ring being managed by a top politician of the ruling Revolutionary Institutional Party, or PRI. An online petition gathering more than 100,000 signatures, as well as previous large protests in front of the radio station this past week in support of Aristegui and her team, did not dissuade the decision of MVS to terminate her contract. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
Government leaders in Brazil have promised to step up their fight against corruption. It comes after big anti-government demonstrations on Sunday. Over 1 million people took to the streets across the country. The demonstrations were called by right-wing groups over a deepening corruption scandal in the state-controlled oil company Petrobras. A number of those taking part openly called for military intervention to bring down the elected government.
The government emphasizes the need to deepen our fight against corruption, both with the new measures that will be announced by the president in the coming days, in accordance with a promise she made during her campaign, and by listening to the people, talking to the people, to see what could be done differently.
The protests were not a surprise, and there was an election a short while ago, and people remember that it was very polarized, and there's political memory. Obviously, most of today's participation came from people who didn't vote for Dilma, and we're okay with that.
Now for other stories making news around the world. The Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has insisted his country will not go back to austerity policies. Tsipras was in Brussels last week and said he was optimistic about a deal with the European Union. He has now told a Greek newspaper that the key to an honorable compromise is to recognize that the previous policies of extreme austerity have failed, and not just in Greece, but the whole of Europe. Jeffrey Williams has been charged with first-degree assault for the shooting of two Ferguson, Missouri police officers last week. St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Robert McCulloch says that Williams admitted to firing the shots that wounded the officers last Thursday. It came at the end of a rally to call for sweeping reforms in Ferguson. The disturbances in Ferguson began when a white police officer shot dead an unarmed black teenager last summer. In the aftermath of the devastation done by Cyclone Pam in Vanuatu, aid agencies are reporting that conditions are among the most challenging they have ever faced. The country's president, Baldwin Lonsdale, has reportedly said that climate change is partly to blame. He notes changing weather patterns, rising seas, and heavier than average rain. Lonsdale is pleading for immediate international assistance for his country, one of the world's poorest. So far, 8 deaths have been reported. With Israeli elections just a day away, the current prime minister has told a crowd of supporters that Israel must avoid electing what he called a left-wing government. Some reports indicate that the newly formed center-left Zionist Union are leading Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. The only contender representing Israeli Arabs, the Joint List, also hopes to increase its representation and could play an important role in a divided Knesset. That's the legislative branch of the Israeli government. For more now on the Israeli elections and clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces, we go to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza.
This morning and during the latest Israeli elections, Lieberman visited the Palestinian-occupied city of Hebron and visited the Al-Ibrahimi Mosque. Raging Palestinian protesters and Palestinian youth to clash with the Israeli forces and with the Israeli settlers who entered the Palestinian-occupied city of Hebron. At the same time, Israeli forces detained over 23 Palestinians in different cities in the West Bank because of these clashes, and also 7 Palestinian children were arrested in the city of East Jerusalem.
The foreign ministers of Iran and the United States have met in Switzerland for the start of a new round of talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Mohammad Zarif was due to meet European representatives in Brussels later in the day. Arriving for those talks, the EU foreign policy chief said it was vital to establish common ground if a political deal is to be reached this month. Both sides have set the end of June as the deadline for a full technical agreement.
So we are entering a crucial time, crucial 2 weeks, where the negotiations will have to find the common ground for a good deal. So today we will have one part of these important negotiations, the European one, here in Brussels.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Kyrgyzstan President Almazbek Akabayev on Thursday. It marked Putin's first public appearance since March 5th. Putin dismissed media rumors surrounding what some have called his disappearance. While speaking in St. Petersburg, the Russian president took a shot at media speculation around his whereabouts. He says media would be boring without gossip. Today marks 1 year since the residents of Crimea voted in a referendum to separate from Ukraine. Crimea's ethnic Russians, which comprise the majority of the territory's population, opted to separate after Ukraine's elected government was overthrown by a pro-Western coup in 2014. Crimea's population has been predominantly Russian since at least the 18th century. And taking a look at sports now, Serena Williams returns to the Indian Wells competition after not competing since the year 2001. The world's top-ranking female tennis player was booed and heckled at the event 14 years ago. Her father later accused fans of racist abuse, causing Williams to boycott the competition. But this time things are different, with Serena receiving a standing ovation after winning last Sunday's match. Thousands enter, but there can only be one winner. The Super Comic Convention Masquerade competition is part of one of the biggest comic book conventions in the world. Fans descended upon London to compete for the top prize, 2 tickets to the world's premier cosplay convention in Atlanta. The eventual winner was Ross Cobbold with his portrayal of Ursula, the Ursula character from The Little Mermaid. This year, the world's most beautiful boulevard turns 150 years old. The Ringstrasse in Vienna, Austria is 3 miles long and filled with palaces, museums, and public buildings. Vienna is marking the anniversary with special exhibitions illustrating how the boulevard is beloved by tourists and architecture aficionados from around the world. Art Basel, the organization that stages the world's premier modern and contemporary art shows, launched its 3rd year in China. The show features 233 galleries from 37 countries, which organizers say showcases the best art from Asia and the Pacific, including works from upcoming artists. The show will run until Tuesday. More on those stories and others at our websites, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Monday. Have a great week.